The latest from 7 News with Angela Cox.
Good evening and welcome tonight. Brisbane out of lockdown, but which restrictions remain? Calls to ban alcohol from Parliament House. Controversy over COVID-safe 2-up this Anzac Day. And wild new claims surrounding the royal family feud. But first tonight, Brisbane Airport has had one of its busiest days since the pandemic began, after the city's lockdown was lifted early. Marlena Wapp is live there tonight. Marlena, a sigh of relief for many Queenslanders and people heading there for the Easter break.
Yes, good evening, Ange. Absolutely. After days of uncertainty, the Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk made the announcement at 9 this morning, the lockdown being lifted at midday. So a lot of businesses were caught off guard. They thought it might happen at 5 this afternoon. They quickly called in staff to open doors, set up dining tables and the likes, and get staff back in. But this is the news that a lot of tourism operators in Queensland had been waiting for, because after the snap lockdown was announced on Monday, there were mass cancellations of bookings, but in a good sign, there's been a rush to the airports. Roads have also been busy, though, a lot of people heading south towards the Gold Coast as well. This comes after a record 33,711 tests in Queensland over the past 24 hours. Only one new local infection detected. It was a woman who went to the Hens party in Byron Bay. That's linked to the cluster involving the nurse from Princess Alexandra Hospital, but health authorities are confident that because they can link that case to the cluster, they were confident of lifting that lockdown. So far there are 20 cases in the 2 clusters of the highly contagious UK variant, but authorities believe that while the outbreak isn't over, they will be able to manage it. Now, there will still be restrictions right across Queensland. People will have to carry a mask with them, and at pubs, venues and clubs, patrons will have to be seated when they're eating and drinking. These restrictions will remain in place at least for the next fortnight.
OK, thanks so much, Marlena. Brisbane Lions beat Collingwood in a nail-biting finish that came down to the last kick of the game. Have a look.
But here's the chance to win the game. The siren's going to sound. Siren's gone. After the siren for Bailey to kick the winning goal. They're 5 points down. Every boy dreams of this. Directly in front, he's got it.
The game was relocated from Queensland's Gabba to Melbourne's Marvel Stadium due to the recent outbreak in the Sunshine State. Georgia Comensoli is there for us tonight. Georgia, it was a big night for the Lions.
And what a game it was. Brisbane Lions were behind by 5 points at the siren. They had a chance at goal and they won by a point. And it seems that staying here, being stuck in Victoria, has worked in their favour. And they tried to extend their luck. They are staying here until their next match next weekend. They're scheduled to play in Ballarat against the Western Bulldogs. They could technically go back to Brisbane this week if they wanted to, but they're staying here as a precaution. As for the Gold Coast Suns, when they arrived here on Tuesday, they say they packed enough just in case they got stuck here in Victoria for a few weeks, but they're hoping to get back up to the Gold Coast in time for round 4 to play at Metricon Stadium against Carlton. If any of the Gold Coast or Brisbane home games need to be scheduled elsewhere across the country, it's likely that they'll be played here at Marvel Stadium or at Adelaide. But considering what's happening at Brisbane at the moment, coming out of lockdown early, it's likely that their home games will go ahead. Hopefully, this will be the first and only round of the AFL season this year that's been impacted by COVID. Ange?
Fingers crossed. OK, thanks, Georgia. There was a green light for Sydney's Easter show today. Despite a New South Wales COVID scare this week, the gates opened to tens of thousands of visitors. Here's what Premier Gladys Berejiklian had to say earlier.
There's nothing that I've seen or heard that would cause any concern about any activity in Greater Sydney. It will actually be the largest ticketed event during the pandemic, I think, anywhere in the world.
Tom Hartley is at the show tonight. Tom, it was a nervous build-up, but was it all a success today?
Well, Ange, it certainly was. They had close to 50,000 people through the gates over the course of today, many of whom have gone. As you can see, they're turning the lights down, powering down, but they are really pleased with the turnout so far. Tomorrow's event is sold out. 60,000 people. As the Premier said, the most people to gather at a venue that's not seated anywhere in the world. And over the course of the show, you can imagine the numbers coming through there again. The most we've seen gather anywhere in the world. So big kudos to Sydney for pulling that off. There are COVID restrictions in place and there are apps that you can check how many people are in particular parts of this venue, but everything has been spaced out nicely, so there is plenty of room to move. Still 11 days to go here at the show. The action is sure to be on tomorrow.
Okay, thanks so much, Tom. A South Australian court has handed down one of the longest murder sentences in the state's history. Paul Klazowski was jailed for at least 34 years for shooting dead his son and his son's girlfriend at close range. Both were just 19. Klazowski will be 80 by the time he is released. Notorious Porsche driver Richard Pusey is facing more charges after a video emerged of him stealing the keys of an elderly man's car during a road rage incident. Pusey was in court again today, accused of assaulting the man. A magistrate ended up muting Pusey's microphone in court because he kept interrupting. And an elderly couple from Melbourne who went missing have been found safe and well. Otto and Gerda, who are both 87, were last seen at the Crown Casino but vanished, prompting an emotional appeal from their daughter. They were spotted sitting in their car near Swan Hill in Victoria's northwest this morning, about 400 kilometres away from home. The chorus of frustration over how slowly the vaccine is being rolled out grew louder today, with opposition leader Anthony Albanese taking aim at the Morrison government. Take a listen.
Well, today, of course, is April Fool's Day, and this government was taking Australians for fools for trying to blame state governments for its own failings. And that's why we're behind countries like Rwanda and Bangladesh and Lebanon.
Olivia Leeming is in Canberra for us tonight. Olivia, let's take a look at these numbers. On one single day in March, the UK vaccinated 752,000 people. That is more than all the doses administered here since our rollout began in February. On one list, Australia doesn't even make it into the top 100 countries for progress on the vaccination front. How is the government responding to this criticism?
Well, Ange, trying to keep things in perspective, they have made the point that Australia is still the envy of the world in terms of case numbers, and certainly the supply disruptions overseas have not helped the speed of the rollout, though we're still hearing from GPs claims of a lack of communication about when they're getting supplies, delivery failures, and there's still this blame shifting going on between the state and federal governments. Now, we understand the federal government has indicated it will come to an agreement with New South Wales to help speed up the rollout. Premier Gladys Berejiklian has offered for New South Wales hospitals to become mass vaccine hubs, but there's still some confusion on exactly when and how that will work, Ange.
And Olivia, there's been a development in the Andrew Laming story. What's the latest there?
Yeah, some relief for him, even though his political career as a Liberal MP is in tatters. He has been cleared by Queensland Police of an upskirting allegation. He'd been accused of taking a photo of a woman bending over at a business in Brisbane in 2019. Now, investigators interviewed a number of people but say they've found no evidence to show that he committed a criminal offence. He was facing up to 3 years behind bars if he'd been charged and convicted, Ange.
OK, thanks so much, Olivia. A surprising financial trend has boomed during the pandemic, with a new generation of investors joining the market. Let's bring in Network Finance editor Gemma Acton. Gemma, it's called the Exchange Traded Fund Market, ETFs. What is it?
Right, so an ETF is basically a basket of shares. So just say you want to invest in the theme of cybersecurity. You think that cybersecurity shares will do well on the share market, but you don't know any one individual company to invest in. You can buy a cybersecurity ETF, and that will give you exposure to several different cybersecurity companies. So if you don't know any individual company, or you don't know which one's going to do well, or you don't know their financials well enough, it sort of spreads out your risk a little bit. And one of the reasons it's been so popular is, firstly, the fees tend to be a lot lower than many active managers are charging, so you can keep a bigger proportion of any profits you make. But also, it's for people who are new to the market and they just don't have that much familiarity with lots of different companies. They find it a little bit more reassuring to spread their risk a bit further.
So we've said it's boomed during the pandemic. How has the market changed over the past 12 months? months?
Yeah, well, it's just grown so rapidly. Firstly, in terms of the amount of ETFs that are available to buy. So when I mentioned the cybersecurity theme, you can really get any theme you want, whether that's renewable energy or European banks, or you think of a theme, there's bound to be an ETF these days. And we've seen so much more money in general pour into the market over the last year from people who've never invested before. A lot of these are younger people as well. Many people have had more money on their hands. We've seen that savings have gone up, people haven't been travelling, there's been stimulus checks coming in, and time on their hands to look at the market, be stuck at home, not be going out, not be going to work. And so many people have invested, and the ETFs have just provided a really attractive point of entry for many people. Not just in Australia. In Australia, the market's now thought to be worth about $100 billion, but globally it's about $10 trillion. So this really is a global phenomenon.
Wow. Also in finance news, investors seem to have lost their appetite for Deliveroo.
Yes. The meal delivery service Deliveroo was a private company until yesterday, when it listed on the London Stock Exchange. In its first day, its share price dropped by 44%. For a couple of reasons. Firstly, because the founder insisted on his shares having more voting rights than other shares. And you see this sometimes. Mark Zuckerberg did the same thing with Facebook, but it's not very popular with investors. But secondly, even though Deliveroo was initially valued at around 13 billion Australian dollars yesterday, remember, this is a company that's never made a profit, and they don't know when it's going to make a profit. And people are getting a little bit nervous about when some of these companies, like Uber, like Deliveroo, are actually going to start delivering profits year after year after year. And one reason they might not for a while longer is the ruling we saw recently in the UK against Uber, where Uber now has to count its riders and drivers as workers, meaning they'll have to have holiday rights, minimum wage. If that happens to Deliveroo as well, which hasn't happened yet, it's going to cost them even more and take them even longer to make a profit.
OK, well, great. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Ange.
For the first time, police body cam vision showing George Floyd's death has been publicly released. It was played during Derek Chauvin's murder trial. The short clip shows Floyd distressed and sobbing as police become increasingly aggressive. Shocking video has emerged of people smugglers abandoning a toddler and a 5-year-old on the US border. The smugglers can be seen dropping the 2 children over the 4-metre border wall before running off and leaving them. US Border Patrol said the 2 girls were unharmed but called the incident an appalling act. And France has been ordered into a 3rd national lockdown as COVID cases spiral out of control once more. President Emmanuel Macron had previously tried to avoid another round of restrictions to protect the economy. But France's daily infections have now reached around 40,000 and the death toll is approaching 100,000. Royal biographer Lady Colin Campbell has made sensational claims about the identity of the senior royal who made the skin colour comments to Prince Harry. Have a listen to what she said on her YouTube channel.
Princess Anne was rightly concerned that if the marriage proceeded and there were children, there would be huge problems. Not because of Meghan's colour, but because of Meghan's inability to actually have respect for the institution.
Europe correspondent Sarah Greenhalgh is live for us in London. Sarah, how have these comments gone down in the UK?
And good evening. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Buckingham Palace has declined to comment on these claims so far. But this, of course, is the answer to the question that everyone has been asking since this interview went to air. Who was the royal family member who made these comments about Archie's skin colour? Well, according to Lady Colin Campbell, or Lady C as she's known, no one actually said it. But she says it could have been a case that comments made by Princess Anne regarding the cultural differences between Brits and Americans have been misinterpreted by Prince Harry as being about colour. She also goes on to say that these were the genuine concerns of a loving aunt. The Princess Anne was the champion of the firm when it came to saying don't marry this girl before Harry and Meghan actually did tie the knot, but that when it comes to racism there is no guilty party because no one actually said it.
Sarah, Lady Campbell is a pretty controversial figure. How reliable is she?
And controversial, eccentric, well known for her outspoken opinion. She has appeared on many reality TV shows. She has written 8 books or published 8 books about the British royal family, but she doesn't say who her sources are, of course. She hasn't said where this information has come from. Royal insiders say there is certainly a lot of detail in these claims, and in terms of her being described as an author, she has been said to be more aristocratic gossip than the literary type, so make of that what you will. She has published these claims to her 77,000 YouTube subscribers, and they've gone on to obviously make headlines around the world. So watch this space, Ange.
I think I'll take it with a grain of salt. Thanks so much, Sarah. Still to come on the latest, cleaning up Canberra. Should Parliament ban booze? Fun police or fair game? The 2-Up controversy ahead of Anzac Day. And why these two furry friends have an unbreakable bond. That's next on the latest from 7 News. Time now to take a closer look at some of the news headlines. Joining me are panellists Dee Madigan and Jess Eva. Let's start off with the vaccine bun fight between the states and federal government over who's to blame for the delay. Dee, a lot of finger pointing here. Has the federal government made a mess of this rollout?
Every lockdown from now on could have been avoided. This is the thing, is we're doing so well, but if we had the vaccination rollout, we could actually sit back, relax a little bit. Instead, we're sort of stuck in this cycle, and it feels like we've all done our bit. Yeah. The federal government, maybe they had more than one job, but this was a big one, for them. Yeah.
Well, even if they could just inject Byron Bay so that the Blues Festival could go ahead. Let's just start small, or maybe places around Movie World or somewhere, just so people can have their holidays, and then the rest can have. Maybe there's a new rollout geographical location.
Moving on, off the back of a scandalous month, there is talk of a ban on alcohol in Parliament to help to resolve its toxic culture. Dee, is a booze ban part of the answer here?
Look, I'm in two minds. I hate the nanny state thing, and there's a lot of functions that happen there that are in that quasi space between work and play, and we have them, in advertising, in media, where work functions. We have alcohol at that, and essentially a lot of what those work functions, the lobbyist function, things like that. But I guess at that time, if Parliament is sitting and they still have to go back in for votes and that, I think it's not unreasonable to expect them to be under 0.05. Because do you remember Tony Abbott actually got so drunk once he slept through an entire vote? So it seems awful that we should have to do this, but something has to change. So I think all things should be on the table.
Yeah, well, fair enough. I mean, we couldn't come to work and be drunk while we're on air, but, well, not anymore.
Those days are over.
Jess, do you think it is too much to expect, though, that our elected officials can behave well even after they've had a few drinks? Not while they're at work, but at functions.
Look, I think that if you're representing your country and you're representing areas of state and you're in charge, just ban the booze. Lately, we've found that a lot of the incidents have been alcohol-fuelled, and I find that if we're going to ban alcohol and avoid long-term trauma for people that are working there, fantastic. At the same time, is alcohol really an excuse for the behaviour? Is this a deterrent to go, look, if we ban booze, everything's going to be fixed? Tick. Public don't scrutinise us anymore. We're making active measures. So I think that the banning of the booze is also quite premeditated.
That's what I have a problem with, the idea that somehow if you're drunk, that's somehow an excuse for this behaviour, or that if someone is drunk enough, they will make bad decisions and rape someone. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me.
And also there's a whole lot of people who are perfectly well behaved, and then you're sort of saying to them, you can't, even though you've just worked a 12-hour day and whatever, you can't have a drink because there is some horrible person out there who will rape someone if he's had a few drinks. And you're right, alcohol, people do make bad decisions on alcohol, but there's a difference between making bad decision and sexually assaulting someone. There's a massive line there that gets crossed, and you kind of feel the people who cross those lines, it's not the alcohol. There's something inherently wrong with their whole everything, and an hour of counselling is not going to fix it either.
OK, now a band that was supposed to be playing at Blues Fest says it's hypocritical for the festival to be cancelled when crowded sports events are allowed to go ahead. Jess, what do you think? Do you think this is unfair?
As much as I want the Blues Fest to go ahead, I have made out with a lot more people at a music festival than I have at a football game. So
football game's a lot shorter.
A lot shorter. The guys are more into the footy than they are their women. Like, it's not really a place to pick up. So I understand there's a lot of singing, there's a lot of making out, there's a lot of dancing. I think it's a tragedy, and if we could avoid it, I think it's been unnecessarily shut down, but I understand that you will probably have greater risk at contracting coronavirus than you would going to a football game.
Okay, your love life aside, the other big concern, though, is that the live industry, I mean, it is taking a massive hit. Do you think there was any way that the festival could have gone ahead?
I feel so sorry for them because they had to make a decision on the spur of the moment, really. There was people coming in, and in retrospect, I think it probably could have gone ahead because we then had Queensland opened up. But what do? You know, if they'd said it will go ahead and then more people hopped on planes and then Queensland decided to increase the lockdown and there was more cases in Byron, they would have been, you know, they were kind of damned if they did, damned if they didn't. They took a chance that it was smarter to close it down. In retrospect, probably it wasn't, but you can't blame them, I think, for making that decision.
We all have 20/20 vision in hindsight, which isn't fair. But kind of ironic, they're saying that people are still coming into that area. A lot of those people who are going to the Blue Cest are still going to Byron, so they're still going to do something. So,
well, you would if you booked your flights. You're not going to risk the cancellation of not getting a refund. Like, it's going to be packed there. I'd stay away.
It's not just the music industry that's frustrated. In New South Wales, crowds of 75,000 can go to the footy, but there are still strict restrictions when it comes to playing two-up. Guidelines say it must be played outside with 2 square metres between participants, and bets can only be placed between those standing next to each other. Jess, obviously a lot of RSL clubs pretty upset about this.
I think this has gone slightly too far. At the moment, we can stand up in a pub, we can dance. I don't know why we're getting so strict on two-up. There's going to be a lot of diggers that have served their time, and that's how they enjoy themselves. I understand they can go outside, but surely we can just let this one slide. I think they've been over the top here.
Yeah, and I guess especially when we see these football games. I mean, I don't want to sound anti-football, but we seem to be making a lot of concessions to make sure sporting events still happen.
Yeah, look, there is certainly more touching in the two-up because you've got money going backwards and forwards, and you do have people who are in the dangerous category if they get COVID. However, if this was in Queensland, I could have understood it. But in New South Wales, where we don't have community transmission at the moment, it does seem like overkill.
We've all worked a very long time since our last holiday. So sometimes I feel like some of these people that are putting the restrictions in place, they're knackered. So I reckon they're like, oh, God, what are we going to do? Cancel it. What are we going to do about Blues Fest? I've got 24 hours before I'm on my Easter holiday. Just cancel it. I can't deal with the paperwork when I get back.
And obviously, if anything goes wrong, it's a massive debacle.
Yeah.
So you err on the side of safety, sometimes probably too much, but...
Yeah, OK. Well, thank you so much, ladies. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having us.
Still to come, Gemma's back with a look at the markets. We'll have your Good Friday weather forecast. Plus, did you fall for them? The best of this year's April Fool's pranks. And why this heartwarming tale is tonight's final frame. That's next on the latest from 7 News. Welcome back. These pictures were shot from Sydney CBD looking west towards Homebush Bay, where the Easter show returned after 2 years. The evening fireworks display a sure sign we are finally on the road to recovery. Tomorrow's temperatures around the country: Brisbane, a possible shower and 26, Melbourne sunny with a top of 29, and partly cloudy and 32 in Perth. In other parts of the country, sunny and 33 in Mount Isa, mostly sunny and 18 in Perisher, and a fine high of 31 for Port Lincoln. Now, Gemma Acton's back with a look at the markets.
Thanks, Ange. The first day of April and the last day before the Easter long weekend. Whatever the inspiration was, it was enough to deliver a higher session across almost all Asian stock markets, the ASX 200 even hitting a 6-week high. US futures are also pointing to a higher open, with investors soaking up the positive side of President Joe Biden's multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure announcement and not focusing too much, for now at least, on the tax hikes needed to pay for it. Gold has managed to push back through $1,700, and as it came in smaller than expected, that infrastructure news has taken a little wind out of the sails of the US dollar, giving a small boost to our local currency. Ange.
Thank you, Jem. Now, after the year that's been, it's no surprise Aussies were keen to jump on April Fool's Day. Early on the scene were plans to build a new multi-million-dollar mansion, quite literally on the harbour. The architects behind the prank, there it is, even went as far as mocking up a fake social media protesting against the home. Foodies were also a prime target. Two Australian icons combined forces to create this monstrosity, Vegemite-flavoured Dare coffee. Sandwich giant Subway tease fans with their new coriander cookie. There it is. Meanwhile, Sydney commuters were told to be on the lookout for a horse running wild on the train network. And finally, a new campaign for South Australia that's raised eyebrows, inviting travellers to, quote, go down south with your mouth. South Australia Tourism has denied responsibility for the ad, so we can only assume it's a rather saucy April Fool's prank. And before we go tonight, meet Sisu. A general store owner was forced to call animal services officers when Sisu, a stray dog, broke into their shop not once, not twice, but 5 times to steal the same purple unicorn toy. When officers arrived, they admired the dog's tenacity and bought the toy for him because, well, he wanted it. They then drove him to the local shelter where the dog was given some TLC and a new name. Now, Sisu and his purple friend are inseparable, and they are tonight's final frame because we couldn't resist. Thank you for your company this evening from the team here at 7 News. That is the latest. I'm Angela Cox. Good night.